Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into the opulent, perfumed, and surprisingly perilous halls of an ancient Persian palace. We're not here to admire the intricate tapestries or the gleaming gold. Oh no, we're here to shadow someone whose job is, shall we say, a matter of taste, quite literally. We're following a day in the life of a Persian royal food taster. Imagine your entire career, your very existence, hinges on your ability to discern the subtle hint of nightshade in a fig, or the metallic tang of arsenic in a sip of wine, all before it reaches the august lips of the King of Kings. You are the first line of defense, the palate-driven shield against assassins, disgruntled chefs, or just a really unfortunate case of ancient food poisoning. The air around you hums with the low murmur of courtly intrigue. The scent of roasting meats and exotic spices fills your nostrils, but beneath it all is the constant, thrumming baseline of mortal risk. One wrong nibble, one overlooked symptom. And it's not just a bad day at the office, it's your last. Honestly, given the sophisticated poisons available even in antiquity, and the high stakes of royal power struggles, you probably won't survive this gig long enough to claim your pension, assuming royal food taster even came with a pension plan. Probably just a really elaborate funeral, if you're lucky. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support, however small, helps keep these historical deep dives, or perhaps gentle sips, going. And hey, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these sleepy tales travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first pale fingers of dawn are just beginning to stroke the latticed windows of your modest, yet privileged chamber within the sprawling palace complex at Persepolis. Or perhaps Susa. You awaken not to the gentle chirping of sparrows, but to an internal alarm clock forged from equal parts duty and dread. Your name is Mithra, or perhaps Artazostre, or some other suitably resonant Persian name that will, you fervently hope, not be inscribed on a tombstone by nightfall. Your perilous purpose, your entire reason for being within these hallowed, dangerous walls is to taste, to test, to be the living crucible for every morsel and every drop that will pass the lips of the great king. Darius, or Xerxes, or whichever magnificent, heavily bearded monarch currently holds the fate of the empire in his ringed hand, the air itself in your room seems to carry the whispers of the palace already stirring. The distant clatter of bronze from the direction of the kitchens, the soft tread of guards in the corridors, the murmur of early morning prayers. Each sound is a reminder that the vast, intricate machinery of the Achaemenid court is grinding into motion. And you are a small, vital, and eminently replaceable cog within it. You lie still for a moment, on your simple but clean sleeping mat, allowing your senses to awaken fully. This isn't a job for the dull-witted or the numb-palated. Your taste buds, your sense of smell, even your eyesight and hearing are your primary tools, your only real weapons against the unseen enemies who might seek to harm the king through his food. A mainstream historical fact is that food tasters, or procurators, were indeed a feature in many ancient royal courts, including the Persian Empire, where the risk of assassination by poison was a constant concern for rulers. Their role was taken incredibly seriously. You stretch, feeling the familiar tension in your shoulders. It never truly leaves you, this low hum of anxiety. It's the price of proximity to power, the daily premium on your life insurance policy, paid in vigilance. You can't afford an off day, a moment of distraction. A head cold could be a death sentence, not just for you, but potentially for the king if your dulled senses miss a subtle taint. You rise and perform your ablutions with meticulous care. The water in the ewer is cool, a welcome sensation against your skin. You examine your reflection in a small, polished bronze mirror. Are your eyes clear? Is your tongue clean? Any unusual coating? Any sign of illness that might compromise your judgment today? You are a finely tuned instrument, and any deviation from your baseline health is a cause for concern. You recall stories whispered among the other household staff, tales of tasters who grew careless, or who developed a fondness for a particular dish that clouded their objectivity, often with tragic results. Such thoughts are not conducive to a calm morning, but they are an unavoidable part of your mental landscape. Your life is a tightrope walk over a chasm of potential poisons, and every meal is another step. Historians still argue whether royal food tasters were chosen for their inherent resilience to certain common toxins, their acute senses, or purely for their unwavering loyalty and perceived expendability. Perhaps it was a grim combination of all three, a chilling job spec if ever there was one. As you dress in your clean, simple but official court attire, perhaps a linen tunic and trousers, nothing too ostentatious to draw unnecessary attention, but clearly marking you as someone with specific duties, you mentally review the previous day. Were there any unusual flavors? Any lingering aftertastes? Any cooks who seemed overly nervous or furtive? Your memory must be as sharp as your palate. A quirky or fringe tidbit from ancient courts often involves the elaborate precautions surrounding royal food, sometimes extending to the belief that certain gemstones worn by the taster or placed near the food could change color or crack in the presence of poison. You don't have such a magical gem, just your wits and your senses, and a prayer to Ahura Mazda for protection, though you sometimes wonder if he's listening, or if he just assumes you're part of the divine catering plan. You take a deep breath. The day hasn't truly begun. The sun is barely gracing the highest towers of Persepolis. But for you, the perilous purpose is already in full swing. The king will expect his breakfast soon, and you, his living shield, must be ready. The whispers of the palace seem to grow louder now, calling you to your duty, a duty that tastes remarkably like an existential gamble. Every single day, the dawn's light, now a soft rose and gold, filters more insistently into your chamber. The palace is stirring with a more pronounced energy, the sounds of its myriad inhabitants preparing for the day's intricate ballet of power, service, and survival. Before you can even think about approaching the royal kitchens, let alone the king's dining table, you must undergo your sacred morning preparations. This isn't just about splashing water on your face and making sure your toga, or rather your practical Persian tunic, is straight. This is a ritual of purification and sensory attunement, a vital process to hone the instruments upon which the king's life, and your own, depends. Your body is a temple, as they say, but in your case, it's more like a highly sensitive and heavily guarded laboratory designed for one specific, terrifying experiment detecting death before it's served on a golden platter. Your first act is often one of quiet meditation or prayer. You might face the direction of the rising sun, a symbol of Ahura Mazda's light and truth, and offer a silent plea for clarity, for heightened senses, for the wisdom to discern the hidden from the overt. You need a calm mind, an unclouded focus. Panic or distraction are luxuries you cannot afford. A tremor in your hand as you lift a testing spoon, a moment of hesitation born of fear rather than caution, these could be fatal. So you breathe deeply, centering yourself, pushing away the nagging anxieties that are the constant companions of your profession. You try to achieve a state of detached vigilance, a professional calm that belies the undercurrent of mortal risk. This mental preparation is as crucial as any physical cleansing. You can't just roll out of bed and start sniffing the king's figs. There's a gravitas to this, a daily rededication to your unnerving craft. Next comes the physical purification. You would bathe meticulously, using perhaps a mild, unscented soap made from olive oil and lye, or specific cleansing herbs. A mainstream historical fact is that personal hygiene was valued in many ancient cultures, including Persia, and for someone in your position, cleanliness would be paramount, not just for social reasons, but to ensure no lingering personal scents or residues interfere with your ability to detect subtle aromas in the food. You scrub your hands and forearms with particular care, perhaps using a powdered abrasive like finely ground pumice or sand to remove any impurities. Your mouth is rinsed thoroughly, possibly with water infused with mint or other cleansing herbs, to ensure your palate is as neutral and receptive as possible. No lingering taste of last night's hopefully safe, modest meal should compromise your judgment of this morning's royal repast. It's like a wine sommelier cleansing their palate between tastings, except your wine might be laced with hemlock, and the notes you're looking for are less oaky and more, oh dear, I'm going numb. You might also engage in specific exercises to sharpen your senses. Perhaps you spend a few minutes inhaling from a series of covered jars containing known, subtle scents. A faint trace of almond, always a worry. That bitter almond smell. The earthy aroma of a particular root. The delicate fragrance of a rare flower. This olfactory calibration helps to keep your nose in peak condition. Similarly, you might taste minute quantities of known benign substances, a grain of salt, a drop of honey, a speck of a common spice, just to ensure your taste buds are registering accurately, that nothing is dulled or distorted. Historians still argue about the specific training methods and sensory exercises employed by ancient food tasters, as detailed records are scarce, but it's logical to assume that some form of regular sensory honing would have been practiced, akin to how musicians practice scales or athletes drill fundamentals. Your senses are your livelihood and your lifeblood. A quirky or fringe tidbit could involve specific dietary restrictions. You, as a taster, might have to follow. Perhaps you are forbidden from consuming overly spicy or pungent foods in your own time, lest they dull your palate for the subtleties of the king's cuisine. Or maybe there are certain palate-cleansing foods you are required to eat at specific intervals. You might also be under observation yourself. Your own health and habits would be of keen interest to those responsible for the king's safety. Any sign of illness or unusual behavior on your part could see you temporarily, or permanently, removed from your duties. It's a bit like being a concert pianist who isn't allowed to play rugby in their spare time, lest they damage their precious fingers. Only your fingers are your taste buds, and the consequence of a wrong note is considerably more final. Finally, before leaving your chamber, you might don a specific overgarment or a badge of office, something that identifies you to the palace guards and kitchen staff, granting you access to the restricted culinary sanctums, but also marking you out as the one who walks daily with death. It's a heavy cloak to wear, both literally and metaphorically. You take one last look at your reflection, your senses now hopefully at their peak. Your mind as clear and focused as you can make it. The sacred morning preparations are complete. Now, it is time to face the kitchens, the chefs, and the ever-present unspoken question that hangs over every dish: is this the one? Is this the meal that carries a silent, deadly secret with a steadying breath? You step out into the corridor, your palate primed, your nerves are as ready as they'll ever be. Your personal preparations, the meticulous cleansing of body and sharpening of senses, are complete. You step out from the quiet solitude of your chamber into the awakening artery of a palace corridor. The air here is already beginning to thicken with the complex aromas drifting from the distant royal kitchens. A faint hint of roasting lamb, the sweet perfume of baking bread, the sharp tang of exotic spices. These scents, which might delight another, are for you a prelude to scrutiny, a checklist of potential carriers for harm. Your destination is the heart of this olfactory symphony, the royal kitchens. But gaining entry is not a simple matter of strolling through a doorway. You must navigate the kitchen's guarded gateway, a process governed by strict protocols and the ever-watchful, often suspicious, eyes of those who control access to the king's sustenance. As you approach the kitchen complex, likely a series of interconnected courtyards, storehouses, and specialized cooking areas rather than a single room, the ambient noise increases. You hear the rhythmic chop of knives on wooden blocks, the sizzle of food hitting hot oil, the distant roar of a massive oven, the calls of stewards directing an army of servants, and the clatter of bronze and clay cookware. It's a hive of purposeful activity, a culinary factory dedicated to producing the lavish meals worthy of the King of Kings. But it's also a potential fortress of threat. A mainstream historical fact is that Achaemenid Persian palaces, like those at Persepolis or Susa, had vast and highly organized kitchen facilities, capable of preparing food for thousands of people daily, from the king and his immediate court to soldiers and administrative staff. The logistics involved were immense, and so were the security challenges. At the main entrance to the kitchen precinct, you encounter the first layer of security. Stern-faced guards, perhaps members of the elite immortals or dedicated palace sentinels. Stand armed and alert. They know you, of course. Your face is as familiar here as the chief baker's, but familiarity breeds no relaxation of protocol. You must present yourself, perhaps offer a specific passphrase or gesture, or show a token of your office. They scrutinize you, their eyes sweeping over you for any sign of anything out of the ordinary. Are you carrying anything you shouldn't be? Are you accompanied by anyone unauthorized? Do you appear nervous or unwell? Their gaze is professional, impersonal, but a constant reminder that this is a high security zone. It's like going through airport security, but instead of a metal detector, you have the unwavering stare of a man who could probably skewer you with his spear before you could say, "Pass the salt." Once past the outer guards, you enter a domain controlled by the chief steward of the kitchens, or a similar high-ranking culinary official. This individual, often a powerful figure in their own right, is responsible for overseeing the entire food preparation process. They are your primary point of contact, and often your primary source of friction or alliance. They, too, will observe you closely. Is your demeanor correct? Are you showing the proper respect for their domain, while also maintaining the authority of your own grim office? There's a delicate power dynamic at play here. You are there to potentially find fault, to identify a lapse in their security or their standards. They, in turn, are under immense pressure to deliver perfect and perfectly safe meals. It's a relationship built on mutual necessity and a healthy dose of mutual suspicion. "Greetings, O taster of royal delights," the steward might say, his voice smooth as honey but his eyes sharp as obsidian. "May your palate be discerning today, and may our humble efforts find favor not only with the great king, but also with your discriminating senses." A subtle emphasis perhaps on discriminating, a reminder that your job is to find problems. You might be required to perform another small ritual of purification at this stage, perhaps washing your hands again in a designated basin, or donning a specific clean overgarment provided by the kitchen staff to prevent any outside contaminants from being introduced into the food preparation areas. Every step is deliberate, observed. You are aware of the dozens, even hundreds, of eyes upon you as you move deeper into the kitchens. Cooks, bakers, scullions, butchers, pastry chefs. They all pause momentarily in their work to note your passage. Some might offer a respectful nod, others a resentful glare. You are the harbinger of potential disaster for them too. If poison is found, the entire kitchen staff could fall under suspicion, facing interrogation, torture, or worse. Your presence is a constant, unwelcome reminder of the trust placed in them and the dire consequences of that trust being breached. Historians still argue about the exact layout and staffing of Persian royal kitchens and the degree of specialization within them. Were there separate sections for meats, breads, sweets, and beverages, each with its own master chef and team? It seems likely, given the scale of the operations and the sophistication of Persian cuisine, renowned for its rich flavors and elaborate presentation. As you walk through these areas, your senses are on high alert. You're not just looking for obvious threats. You're observing the general hygiene, the demeanor of the staff, the way ingredients are being handled. Is that apprentice butcher being a bit too casual with his cleaver near the king's chosen cut of lamb? Does that particular pot of simmering stew smell slightly off, in a way that's hard to define but prickles at the back of your throat? It's a constant, low-level assessment. A quirky or fringe tidbit concerns the almost sacred status of certain royal utensils or cooking vessels. Specific pots, pans, or serving dishes might be reserved exclusively for the king's food, kept under lock and key, and handled only by a select few trusted individuals. You might have to verify that these specific items are being used, another layer in the intricate web of precaution. It's not just about what's in the food, but how it's made and what it touches. Entering this culinary heart of the palace is like stepping onto a stage where a silent, high-stakes drama is constantly being played out. You are one of the lead actors. Your role both simple and terrifyingly complex to find the flaw in the masterpiece before the king does. With his life. The guarded gateway has been passed, but the real test is only just beginning. You've successfully navigated the guarded labyrinth of the royal kitchens. Your senses already cataloging 1,000 subtle details, the precise aroma of yeast from the bakery, the focused frown of the head saucier, the way a particular guard's eyes lingered a moment too long on a tray of figs. Now, the moment of truth, or at least the first of several such moments today, approaches. The king's breakfast banquet, a term which perhaps sounds overly grand for what might be a relatively light but nonetheless critical first meal, is being prepared for its journey from the kitchens to the royal dining chamber. And you, O taster of imminent gastronomy, are about to engage in the king's breakfast vigil, where each artfully arranged morsel represents a delicate, potentially deadly dance between delight and danger. The scene is one of controlled, intense activity. The chief steward, his face a mask of professional calm that you know can crack under pressure, oversees the final plating. Selected dishes, chosen for their freshness, their adherence to the king's known preferences, and, unspokenly, their relative ease of being tampered with, or so the paranoid part of your brain always suggests, are arranged on gleaming platters of silver or even gold. A mainstream historical fact is that Persian royal banquets were legendary for their opulence and the sheer variety of dishes. Reflecting the vast resources and diverse culinary traditions of the empire, even a simple breakfast for the king would likely involve a selection of fine breads, fresh fruits, cheeses, perhaps some honey, and carefully prepared light meats or egg dishes. Think less a bowl of soggy cereal and more a miniature, edible landscape of imperial power. Before any dish is deemed ready for your august attention, it undergoes another layer of scrutiny. Perhaps a trusted senior cook, or the chief steward himself, performs a preliminary visual inspection and sniff test. They are looking for anything obviously amiss. Discoloration, unusual textures, foreign objects. This is their own internal quality control, a way to catch blatant errors or sabotage before it reaches you. The specialist, their careers, and possibly their lives, also hang in the balance. If you find something, the repercussions will ripple downwards with devastating speed. You watch this process, your eyes missing nothing. The way a cook hesitates before presenting a dish. The subtle sheen on a piece of fruit that looks a little too perfect. Everything is data. Then, the selected items are brought to a designated tasting area, often a quiet, well-lit space away from the main kitchen hustle, but still under heavy guard. You are not alone here. The chief steward will be present, his expression unreadable. There will be guards, silent and imposing. Perhaps a royal physician is also in attendance, ready to observe your reactions and, in a worst-case scenario, attempt to administer some dubious ancient antidote. The atmosphere is thick with unspoken tension. It's like the lead-up to a particularly stressful job interview. If the interview involved potentially ingesting lethal substances and the interviewers were armed, a small portion of each dish is presented to you, often on a dedicated set of tasting utensils. A small silver spoon, a delicate two-pronged fork, a keen-edged knife. These tools are kept scrupulously clean, possibly under your own personal seal, to prevent cross-contamination or tampering. You begin with the simplest, least complex items, gradually moving towards the more elaborately prepared dishes. This is a methodical process, and not a greedy indulgence. First, you examine the item visually. Does it look as it should? Are there any unusual particles? Any strange discolorations upon closer inspection? You lift it to your nose, inhaling deeply. Does it smell fresh? Pure? Correct? Your olfactory sense is often your first and best defense. Many poisons have a characteristic odor, however faint, that a trained nose like yours might detect when an ordinary person would notice nothing. Remember that olfactory calibration you did this morning. This is where it pays off. Then, and only then, do you take a small, cautious taste. You let the morsel rest on your tongue, allowing your taste buds to fully engage. You are not savoring it for pleasure. Though Persian cuisine is undoubtedly delicious, you are dissecting it, analyzing its components, searching for any anomalous flavor, an unusual bitterness, a metallic tang, a strange numbing sensation. Anything that deviates from the expected taste profile of that particular food? You might chew slowly, thoughtfully, then swallow the minute portion. Some tasters, it was whispered, might even have a discreet spittoon nearby, though that would be a risky practice, as some poisons could be absorbed through the lining of the mouth. You, however, are expected to ingest to be the true test. After each item, there is a pause. You note the sensation, the aftertaste. You might take a sip of clean water, provided in a sealed vessel that you yourself unseal, to cleanse your palate before proceeding to the next dish. The steward watches, the physician watches, the guards watch. The silence in the tasting chamber is broken only by the clink of your utensil against a plate, or your own quiet breathing. It's a high-stakes game of sensory roulette. Historians still argue about the psychological toll such a profession must have taken. The constant low-level fear, the burden of responsibility, the social isolation that might come with being perceived as a walking death detector. It must have been immense. A quirky or fringe tidbit, there are ancient accounts from various cultures of using animals, such as dogs or birds, as preliminary food tasters, especially for unfamiliar or particularly suspect items. If the dog keeled over after eating the king's stew, it was a pretty clear sign to send it back to the kitchen and probably arrest the cook. While this might have been practiced, a human taster was still considered essential for their ability to discern more subtle taints or to describe symptoms with greater precision. You are the sophisticated, articulate, bipedal canary in the royal coal mine. As you work your way through the array of breakfast dishes, a piece of soft flatbread, a spoonful of honeyed yogurt, a slice of ripe melon, a morsel of grilled partridge, you are a study in concentration. Each bite is a question, and your continued well-being is the only acceptable answer. The king's breakfast vigil is a nerve-wracking overture to a day filled with such life-and-death culinary critiques. The king's breakfast banquet has been meticulously sampled, each dish subjected to your intense life-or-death scrutiny. For now, at least, you feel no untoward tingling, no sudden nausea, no alarming numbness spreading through your limbs. A small internal sigh of relief, though you would never betray such a feeling outwardly. Your duty, however, does not end with the mere tasting of the prepared meal. An equally crucial, if less immediately dramatic, part of your role unfolds now, the purity quest, the diligent audit of the very ingredients that constitute the royal fare. You must meticulously examine every fruit, every grain, every glistening joint of meat, every fragrant spice, tracing its guarded journey from the fields, orchards, and distant markets to the palace storerooms and, ultimately, to the king's golden plate. This is proactive poison prevention, an attempt to catch potential threats at their source. Following the tasting session, and while the dishes you've approved are being carefully transported under guard to the king's private dining chambers, you might accompany the chief steward or a designated kitchen overseer on a tour of the royal pantries, larders, and spice rooms. These are not your average household cupboards. These are vast, cool, often subterranean chambers, filled with the bounty of the Achaemenid Empire and beyond. Sacks of fine flour from Mesopotamia, barrels of wine from the Zagros mountain slopes, amphorae of olive oil from Ionia, baskets overflowing with dates from Bactria, and chests filled with rare spices from the distant Indus Valley or even further east. A mainstream historical fact is that the Persian Empire, at its height, controlled a vast territory encompassing diverse climates and cultures, which meant the royal kitchens had access to an astonishing variety of ingredients, a testament to the empire's reach and sophisticated logistical networks. Your job is to ensure this bounty isn't a Trojan horse. You move through these storerooms like a detective at a crime scene, though, hopefully, a crime prevented. Your senses are still on high alert. You pick up a handful of wheat grains from an open sack. Are they uniform in color and size? Is there any sign of mold, insect infestation, or, more sinisterly, any unusual dust or powder mixed amongst them? You might crush a few grains between your fingers, sniffing them for any off aromas. You examine a cluster of grapes. Are they plump and fresh, or are some inexplicably shriveled or discolored in a way that suggests something other than natural decay? You might slice open a pomegranate, its crimson seeds like jewels, checking for any internal blemish or strange residue. It's a painstaking, almost forensic examination. You're not just looking for spoilage, you're looking for the subtle signs of deliberate contamination. A tiny pinprick in a fig could be the entry point for a drop of potent poison. A faint, unnatural sheen on a batch of dates might indicate they've been coated with something harmful. The sourcing of these ingredients is also a critical concern. The chief steward would be expected to maintain meticulous records, or at least have a very good memory, possibly assisted by clay tablets or parchment scrolls of where each batch of provisions came from. Which province supplied this particular consignment of lentils? Which merchant delivered these prized pistachios? Who were the carters, the guards, the handlers at every stage of its journey? If a problem is ever traced back to a specific ingredient, this chain of custody is vital for identifying the point of contamination, whether accidental or malicious. You might question the steward sharply if you notice a new supplier for a common item, or if a batch of familiar spices suddenly smells slightly different from the last. These cumin seeds, steward, they lack the usual pungent earthiness of the ones from Carmania. From whence did this particular sack arrive? Your query is polite, but the underlying steel is unmistakable. Historians still argue about the level of sophistication in ancient food supply chains and the methods used to ensure quality control and security for royal provisions. While concepts like hermetic sealing or pasteurization were unknown, there would have been practical measures like using trusted suppliers, inspecting goods upon arrival, storing them in secure, guarded locations, and possibly even having dedicated royal farms or orchards whose produce was exclusively for the king's table. Your audit is a key part of this security net. You are verifying not just the ingredients themselves, but the integrity of the system that delivers them. A quirky or fringe tidbit might involve the use of seals of purity. Perhaps sacks of flour or jars of oil destined for the royal kitchens were sealed at their point of origin with a specific clay seal, bearing the mark of a trusted official or governor. Part of your inspection would be to ensure these seals are intact and untampered with. A broken seal means the entire consignment is suspect and must be rejected, or at the very least, subjected to even more rigorous testing, which probably means you get to eat a lot more of it, under even more stressful conditions. Lucky you. It's an ancient form of tamper-evident packaging, a low-tech but potentially effective security measure. This ingredient audit is a slow, methodical process. It lacks the immediate heart-pounding tension of the tasting itself, but it is no less important. It's about diligence, observation, and an encyclopedic knowledge of what food should look, smell, and even feel like. You are the guardian of the king's larder, the keeper of its purity. Any lapse in your vigilance here could mean that a tainted ingredient makes its way into a future meal. A ticking time bomb in the king's stew. As you move from sack to barrel, from basket to chest, the weight of this responsibility settles upon you. As pervasive and inescapable as the scent of 1,000 spices in the air, your quest for purity is a never-ending task, a daily reaffirmation of your commitment to keeping the deadliest secrets out of the king's kitchen. The storerooms, with their fragrant mountains of spices and grains, have been duly inspected. You've noted the provenance of the new batch of honey from media seems legitimate, smells divine, and eyed a slightly bruised peach with the kind of suspicion normally reserved for foreign spies. Now, another critical category of royal consumables requires your immediate and undivided attention: the beverages. From the simplest cup of cool water drawn from the palace wells to the most exquisite, aged wines decanted from ornate amphorae, every liquid destined for the king's throat must first pass the lethal litmus test of your own. This is the domain of libation tasting, a task that, while perhaps seeming less complex than dissecting the flavors of a 20-ingredient stew, carries its own unique set of risks and rituals. Poisons are often more easily dissolved and concealed in liquids, making this part of your day particularly fraught with peril. The setting for this liquid trial might be a specific chamber near the royal cellars, or a dedicated alcove within the main food tasting area. Here, an array of ewers, carafes, and goblets are assembled, each containing a sample of the beverages intended for the king's consumption throughout the morning and early afternoon. There will be fresh water, likely drawn from a specific guarded royal spring, or, well, believed to be the purest source. There might be fruit juices, pomegranate, grape, or melon, pressed daily under strict supervision. And, of course, there will be wine, a staple of Persian banquets and social life. A mainstream historical fact is that wine production was well established in ancient Persia, and high-quality wines were enjoyed by the nobility, often flavored with spices or honey. The king would have had access to the very best vintages, carefully selected and aged. Your job is to ensure these vintages haven't acquired any unwelcome, life-ending notes. As with the solid foods, the presentation is meticulous. Each beverage is in a separate, clean vessel. You or a trusted attendant under your watchful eye will unseal any containers that were meant to be secured. Your tasting cups, perhaps small, shallow silver bowls or delicate glass beakers glassmaking, though perhaps more developed in neighboring regions like Egypt or Phoenicia, was known to the Persians, are like your food utensils, kept impeccably clean and reserved for your exclusive use. The chief steward, and possibly the royal cupbearer, another high-ranking and incredibly trusted official responsible for serving the king his drinks, will be present. Their expressions carefully neutral, but their attention absolute. A poisoned cup could topple an empire as surely as a dagger in the back. You begin with the water. It seems so innocuous, so basic, but clear, odorless, tasteless poisons are the assassin's dream. You hold the cup to the light. Is it perfectly clear? Are there any minute suspended particles? Any oily sheen on the surface? You sniff it cautiously. Does it have any unusual scent? However faint, a slightly metallic aroma? A hint of something akin to bitter almonds? Or an unidentifiable chemical trace? These are all red flags. Then, you take a small sip, rinsing it around your mouth, allowing it to coat your tongue and the back of your throat. You are searching for any sensation out of the ordinary, a sudden bitterness, a tingling or burning feeling, a strange numbing effect, an unexpected dryness, or an excessive salivation. You swallow, and then you wait. Water itself should have no aftertaste, no lingering presence. Anything that deviates from this pure neutrality is cause for extreme alarm. It's the ultimate palate cleanser, and also, potentially, the ultimate palate destroyer. This water has a distinct aftertaste of impending doom and regret, mostly regret. Next, the fruit juices. These, with their natural sweetness and stronger flavors, could potentially mask certain poisons more easily than water. Again, you examine the color and clarity. Is the pomegranate juice the correct vibrant ruby hue, or is it slightly muddied or unnaturally bright? Does the melon juice smell purely of fresh fruit, or is there a subtle, discordant note? You sip, you analyze, you wait. The natural acidity or sweetness of the fruit should be the dominant sensation. Anything else is suspect. Finally, the wine. This is perhaps the most complex liquid to test. Wines have intricate bouquets, a wide range of flavors, and varying levels of tannins and acidity. A skilled poisoner might try to use these natural characteristics to conceal a harmful substance. You swirl the wine in your tasting cup, observing its leg and the way it clings to the side. You inhale its aroma deeply. Is it fruity, spicy, earthy, woody, as expected for this particular vintage and type? Or is there something alien, something harsh or chemical, lurking beneath the surface? You take a small sip, letting it roll across your palate. You're not just looking for off flavors, but for an imbalance, a note that doesn't belong, a bitterness that's too pronounced, an acidity that burns rather than refreshes. Historians still argue about the specific types of poisons most commonly feared in ancient courts, and the methods tasters might have used to detect them, beyond their own senses. Some theories suggest that certain substances, like silver, were believed to react or tarnish in the presence of specific toxins, though the reliability of such tests is highly debatable. A quirky or fringe tidbit, it's said that some royal cups were made of materials like rhinoceros horn, or were purported to have magical properties that would reveal or neutralize poisons. While perhaps more legend than everyday reality for a taster like you, these stories reflect the pervasive fear of poisoning and the desperate search for safeguards. You, however, rely on your highly trained, highly vulnerable human senses. Each sip of wine is a calculated risk, a moment where the refined pleasure of a noble vintage mingles with the cold dread of potential oblivion. The chief cupbearer is watching you particularly closely now. His role is intrinsically linked to the safety of the king's drink. If you give the nod, he will later pour from that same amphora for the king. If you hesitate, if you show the slightest sign of distress, the consequences are immediate and severe. The libation's lethal litmus test is a constant, nerve-wracking performance on your daily stage. The last drop of potentially perilous pomegranate juice has been swallowed. The final sip of suspiciously scrutinized wine has passed your lips. You've given your cautious preliminary approval to the king's morning liquids and the array of breakfast dishes. The platters and ewers are now being whisked away under heavy guard to the royal dining chamber, where the King of Kings awaits his repast. But for you, O palate of Persia, the ordeal is far from over. Now begins one of the most psychologically taxing parts of your day, the suspenseful symptom watch. After each tasting session, you endure an agonizing, often isolated period of waiting, your body the ultimate royal shield, every internal sensation a potential harbinger of doom. This isn't a casual wait and see. This is a formal, observed period of confinement. You might be escorted to a specific, comfortable but secure chamber near the kitchens or the king's apartments. Here, you will remain for a prescribed length of time, perhaps an hour, perhaps longer. Depending on the perceived risk level or the types of poisons most commonly feared, some act quickly. Others have a delayed onset. You are not simply left alone to read a scroll or practice your lyre. You are under observation, typically by a royal physician and a complement of ever-present guards. Their job is to monitor you for any sign, any symptom, however subtle, that might indicate the presence of poison in the food or drink you have just consumed. It's like being in a very exclusive, very high-stakes medical observation unit, where you are the sole, unwilling patient. You sit, you wait. Every normal bodily sensation becomes a source of intense scrutiny. Is that slight indigestion from the rich spices, or the first stirrings of a deadly toxin? Is that tickle in your throat just a bit of dust, or the onset of a poison that constricts the airways? Is the mild headache you're developing due to the stress of the job, or a sign that your nervous system is under attack? Your mind can play cruel tricks on you in this period. Hyper-awareness can amplify every tiny ache, every gurgle of your stomach, into a terrifying omen. A mainstream historical fact is that the fear of poisoning was so pervasive in many ancient courts that elaborate systems of food security, including tasters, were considered essential, but the psychological pressure on these individuals must have been immense. You are, in essence, a human laboratory animal, waiting to see if the experiment has gone horribly wrong. The physician watches you with a keen, professional eye. He might ask you discreet questions. How are you feeling? Mithra. Any unusual sensations? A metallic taste? Perhaps numbness in the fingertips? He might check your pulse. Look at your pupils. Observe your breathing. His calm demeanor is meant to be reassuring, but you know he's looking for the telltale signs that would trigger an immediate crisis alert. Profuse sweating, convulsions, difficulty breathing, vomiting, paralysis. If any of these occur, he will attempt to administer antidotes, though the effectiveness of ancient remedies against sophisticated poisons was often limited. His primary role, grimly, might be to confirm the presence of poison so that the king can be warned and the source investigated. Heads will roll in the kitchen. Your potential suffering is a diagnostic tool, and it's not a comforting thought. Don't worry. His calm gaze seems to say, if you do start frothing at the mouth, I have this rather interesting poultice of weasel dung and ground unicorn horn. It probably won't work, but the application process is very distracting. During this waiting period, you might try to distract yourself to maintain your composure. Perhaps you review your mental notes from the tasting. Were there any dishes that seemed even slightly questionable? Any flavors that were a little off, even if not overtly alarming? You replay the interactions in the kitchen. Did any of the cooks avoid eye contact? Did the chief steward seem unusually tense about a particular platter? This is also a time for reflection. Though reflecting too much on the precariousness of your existence isn't generally recommended for long-term mental health in this profession. Historians still argue about what benefits package might have come with such a high-risk job. Were food tasters exceptionally well compensated? Were their families cared for by the state if the worst happened? Or were they often slaves or prisoners? Chosen for their expendability, the status and remuneration likely varied greatly across different cultures and time periods. But it's hard to imagine any amount of gold could truly compensate for this daily dance with death. A quirky or fringe tidbit suggests that some tasters developed a kind of gallows humor or became incredibly fatalistic. What else can you do when your job description basically reads, eat things? If you die, we know it was bad. Try not to die. You might even have a running joke with the physician. So, Doc, if my nose starts glowing an unnatural shade of purple today, is that the rare median nightshade? Or did I just get too close to the spice merchant's turmeric display again? Laughter, however strained, might be one of the few defenses against the crushing anxiety. The chamber is quiet. The guards stand like statues. The physician makes another note on his wax tablet. The minutes stretch into an eternity. Every beat of your heart is a countdown. Is it a countdown to safety? To the moment when you can finally relax, knowing you've survived another round? Or is it a countdown to agony? To the confirmation that your palate, your body, has been breached by a hidden enemy? This suspenseful symptom watch is a crucible, burning away any illusion of normalcy, leaving only the stark reality of your role. You are the living boundary between the king and a painful, premature demise, and every day you wait to see if that boundary will hold. The prescribed hour, or perhaps two, of intense, nerve-shredding observation has passed. No alarming symptoms have manifested. Your pulse is steady, or as steady as can be expected given your profession. Your breathing is regular, and your nose has, thankfully, not started glowing purple. The royal physician gives a subtle nod, a silent signal that, for now, the breakfast banquet is deemed safe. A collective, unspoken exhalation of relief might pass between you, him, and even the stoic guards. The king has likely long since finished his morning meal, blissfully unaware of the silent drama that preceded it. But your day, O guardian of the royal gullet, is far from over. As the sun climbs towards its zenith, preparations will already be underway for the midday meal, and with it, a new, complex array of aromatic dishes, each demanding your unwavering vigilance. Welcome to the midday meal maze. The rhythm of the palace kitchens resets. The remnants of the breakfast service are cleared, and a fresh wave of culinary activity begins. The midday meal, or luncheon, for the King of Kings is often a more substantial affair than breakfast, though perhaps not as overwhelmingly opulent as the grand evening banquet. It might feature a wider variety of roasted or stewed meats, more intricate vegetable preparations, different types of bread, and perhaps some lighter, fruit-based desserts. A mainstream historical fact is that ancient Persian cuisine was known for its sophistication, utilizing a rich palette of flavors including sweet, sour, and savory elements, often in the same dish, with ingredients like pomegranates, saffron, pistachios, and various herbs playing key roles. Each new dish is a new equation of potential risk, a new puzzle for your palate to solve. You return to the designated tasting area, or perhaps a different one is used for midday, to maintain an element of unpredictability in the security routine. The same solemn protocol unfolds. The chief steward, his expression as professionally bland as ever, though you fancy you see a flicker of something, relief, resentment, in his eyes after the successful breakfast round, presents the new selection. Guards stand impassively. The physician hovers, his instruments of observation and dubious intervention at the ready. It's like Act 2 of a very tense play, with the same cast but a different set of props, all of which could be lethal. You sometimes wonder if they have bets running on which meal will finally be your last. I've got 5 derricks on the fig paste today, Artaxias, and it looked a bit too innocent. The dishes for the midday meal might present new challenges for your senses. Richer sauces could potentially mask subtle off flavors more effectively than simpler breakfast items. Complex spice blends, while a hallmark of Persian culinary artistry, also offer more variables, more potential for a foreign, harmful element to be introduced unnoticed by a less discerning taster. You must call upon your deep knowledge of traditional recipes and flavor profiles. Does this lamb stew, fragrant with cinnamon and rosewater, taste exactly as it should? Is the balance of sweetness from the apricots and sharpness from the barberries correct? Or is there an underlying bitterness? A faint chemical note that doesn't belong. Your memory for tastes and smells must be encyclopedic. You proceed with the same meticulous caution as before. Visual inspection, the color of the saffron rice, the texture of the grilled fish, the clarity of the accompanying sherbet. Olfactory analysis, the deep aroma of the slow-cooked game, the bright scent of freshly chopped herbs, and then the small, deliberate taste. You are not just looking for poison, you are also, in a way, the king's first food critic. Though your reviews are delivered not in flowery prose but in your continued survival. If a dish is merely poorly prepared, burnt, oversalted, or otherwise unpalatable but not dangerous, you might make a discreet note or quiet comment to the chief steward later. Your primary function is safety, but ensuring the king isn't served a truly awful though harmless meal is probably a secondary, unspoken expectation. No one wants a grumpy king, especially if his grumpiness is directed at the culinary staff. And by extension, the one who let the offending dish pass. Historians still argue about the extent to which food tasters were also expected to judge the culinary quality of dishes, versus purely focusing on safety. It's plausible that in some courts, a taster with a refined palate might also have served as an informal advisor on menus and recipes, their expertise valued beyond just poison detection. For you, however, the primary concern is always the sinister shadow that might lurk within the most delicious-looking creation. That perfectly roasted quail, stuffed with pistachios and herbs. It could be a feathered bomb. That delightful confection of honey and ground almonds, potentially a sweet prelude to a bitter end. It's a constant battle against complacency, against the seductive allure of a beautifully presented, wonderfully aromatic meal. You cannot allow yourself to be lulled into a false sense of security by the sheer artistry of the chefs. A quirky or fringe tidbit. Some ancient poisons were known to be sympathetic, meaning they were more effective or produced different symptoms when combined with certain foods or drinks. A taster would need to be aware of these potential interactions. Perhaps a particular toxin is relatively harmless on its own but becomes deadly when ingested with wine, or with a dish rich in dairy. This adds another layer of complexity to your task. You're not just tasting individual items, but considering their potential combinations in the king's stomach, and by extension, your own. It's like a horrifying game of chemical Sudoku, where filling in the wrong square has rather permanent consequences. As you navigate the midday meal maze, your senses are your only true guide, your survival the only proof of your success, before you once again enter that quiet room for another suspenseful, symptom-laden wait. The midday meal has been tasted, its complex array of flavors and potential threats meticulously navigated. You are now in the midst of your second suspenseful symptom watch of the day, the minutes ticking by with their usual agonizing slowness in the quiet observation chamber. The royal physician, a man whose face you probably see more often than your own family's, if you even have one allowed within these palace confines, observes you with his customary grave attention. Assuming this period passes without incident, as it thankfully usually does, your duties will continue. But they involve more than just the mechanics of eating and waiting. A crucial, yet often unspoken, aspect of your role is the delicate dance of diplomacy and communication you must perform with the royal kitchen staff, particularly the highly skilled, often temperamental, royal chefs. This is the realm of the chef's silent language, where a raised eyebrow, a subtle nod, or a carefully chosen word can carry immense weight. Once the immediate tasting and observation period is over, and before the next meal preparation cycle begins in earnest, you might have a brief, formal interaction with the chief chef or his senior deputies. This isn't a casual chat over a cooling brazier. It's a high-stakes debrief. conducted with the utmost discretion and awareness of the ever-present palace intrigue. A mainstream historical fact is that royal chefs in ancient courts, especially those serving powerful and wealthy monarchs like the Persian kings, were often highly respected artisans, masters of a complex craft. They wielded considerable influence within their own domain and took immense pride in their creations. Your feedback, therefore, must be delivered with extreme tact. You would never openly accuse a chef of attempting to poison the king, not unless you had irrefutable proof and were perhaps already dying from it. Such an accusation would be catastrophic, leading to immediate and brutal consequences for the entire kitchen. Instead, your communication is often indirect, relying on nuance and established understandings. If you detected a very slight, unidentifiable bitterness in a particular sauce, not enough to declare it poisoned, but enough to raise a faint alarm in your highly attuned senses, you might say to the chief chef, "The sauce accompanying the roasted pheasant today, O master of flavors, possessed a certain unexpected sharpness. Perhaps a new batch of herbs was used. The unspoken message is clear: something was different. Something was not quite right. Investigate it. Ensure it does not happen again." The chef, in turn, will read your cues with equal acuity. His reputation, his position, perhaps even his life, depends on the king's satisfaction and, more importantly, his continued good health. A nervous chef might become defensive, offering a flurry of explanations, a new apprentice, a rare spice that was perhaps mismeasured, a problem with the firewood affecting the oven's temperature. A more confident, or perhaps more cunning, chef might meet your gaze steadily, assuring you that all was in order, perhaps subtly implying that your palate might be overly sensitive today. It's a delicate ballet of power and perception. You are the king's shield, but they are the creators of his delight. Neither can function effectively without a degree of grudging cooperation from the other. They need you to clear their food. You need them to produce food that doesn't, well, kill you. It's a symbiotic relationship, albeit one conducted at knife point, metaphorically speaking, or sometimes, perhaps literally. You also serve as a conduit for the king's preferences, though this is usually relayed through the chief steward or royal chamberlain. If the king expressed a particular fondness for a new dish, or a dislike for another, that information would filter down, and the chefs would adjust accordingly. Your role in this might be to confirm that a new dish requested by the king after hearing of it from a traveler or a provincial governor is prepared safely and to a standard worthy of the royal table. You're not just a poison detector, you're a quality control expert by default. His Majesty has requested the median fig and goat cheese tart. Ensure the figs are from the royal orchard, and the cheese, well, let's just say I'll be paying very close attention to the cheese. Historians still argue about the level of autonomy and creative freedom enjoyed by royal chefs in antiquity. Were they strictly bound by traditional recipes and the ruler's known tastes, or did they have scope to innovate and introduce new dishes? Given the Persian Empire's vastness and its embrace of diverse cultural influences, it's likely that the royal cuisine was dynamic, with chefs eager to impress the king with novel and exotic creations, which, of course, would present new challenges for you. The taster, an unfamiliar dish, with unknown ingredients or radical new flavor combination, requires even greater vigilance. You can't rely on your memory of how it should taste if you've never tasted it before. A quirky or fringe tidbit: there might have been secret signals or codes between the taster and the most trusted members of the kitchen staff. A particular way of placing a spoon after tasting, a subtle gesture, a specific innocuous phrase. These could convey information about a dish's safety or a potential concern without alerting the entire kitchen or causing undue alarm. This level of covert communication would be essential in an environment where open accusations are dangerous and where even unfounded suspicion could ruin careers. It's a world of whispers and watchful eyes, where the clatter of pots and pans might just be a cover for a more serious, silent conversation about life and death. Your interactions with the chefs are a masterclass in diplomacy, a constant negotiation of trust and suspicion, all played out against the backdrop of sizzling meats and the ever-present scent of fear. You are their judge, and in a way, they are yours too. for their skill is what stands between you and a very unpleasant reaction. The subtle, coded conversation with the chief chef has concluded. You've conveyed your nuanced feedback on the midday meal. The pheasant sauce was indeed noted, and the median fig and goat cheese tart, thankfully, proved to be both delicious and devoid of any nefarious additions. You might assume the rest of your afternoon will involve lighter duties, perhaps just the occasional sip of the king's sherbet. But then, word arrives from the royal chamberlain tonight. There is to be a grand banquet. Perhaps a delegation of ambassadors from a distant satrapy has arrived, or it's a religious festival honoring Ahura Mazda, or maybe the king is simply in a mood to display his imperial magnificence. Whatever the reason, a state feast means your responsibilities and your risks are about to multiply exponentially. Welcome to the feast's heightened fear, where grand banquets multiply the dishes, the complexity, and the potential for disaster. The entire palace complex buzzes with a new level of frenetic energy. The kitchens, which were already a hive of activity, now resemble a small, exceptionally well-catered battlefield. The number of chefs, cooks, servants, and general hangers-on seems to triple. Exotic ingredients, procured especially for the occasion, arrive under heavy guard, perhaps rare seafood carried in chests of ice from the distant sea, or unusual game birds from the farthest reaches of the empire. The air becomes thick with an almost overwhelming symphony of smells roasting whole lambs and gazelles. Simmering cauldrons of fragrant stews, mountains of jeweled rice, intricate pastries dripping with honey and nuts, and towering displays of artfully arranged fruits. A mainstream historical fact is that Achaemenid Persian banquets were legendary throughout the ancient world for their lavishness, their sheer scale, and the incredible variety of food and drink on offer, often serving as potent displays of the empire's wealth and power. For you, it's a beautiful, terrifying smorgasbord of potential death. Your role becomes even more critical and even more conspicuous. The tasting process for a state banquet is an elaborate, almost theatrical affair. It might take place in a specially designated antechamber, or even in a corner of the grand banqueting hall itself, under the watchful eyes of not just the usual kitchen officials and physicians, but perhaps also senior courtiers and security chiefs. The pressure is immense. Dozens, even hundreds, of different dishes might be presented. You cannot afford to rush. You cannot allow yourself to become overwhelmed by the sheer volume. Each item, from the tiniest stuffed date to a slice from a massive roasted ox, must receive your full, undivided attention. Your senses, already working overtime, are pushed to their absolute limit. Imagine trying to critically assess your 100th unique flavor combination of the day, knowing that any one of them could be your last. It's like being a judge on an extreme cooking show, where the penalty for a bad dish isn't just a harsh critique, but a swift and agonizing demise. The saffron rice with nightshade-dusted almonds. Bold presentation, intriguing texture, but I'm afraid the slightly lethal finish means you're chopped. Literally. The presence of foreign dignitaries or important guests adds another layer of complexity and risk. These guests might bring their own cooks or offer gifts of food and wine to the king, a common diplomatic gesture. These gifted items are a particular source of anxiety. While rejecting a gift from a powerful ambassador could cause a diplomatic incident, accepting it without rigorous testing is unthinkable. You become the first line of diplomatic digestion. You might have to taste dishes prepared by unfamiliar cooks, using unknown ingredients or cooking methods. The potential for a deliberate, politically motivated poisoning attempt is at its peak during such occasions. The king is not just eating, he is engaging in culinary diplomacy, and you are ensuring it doesn't become culinary warfare. Historians still argue about the specific protocols for tasting food intended for royal guests at such banquets. Did the guests also have their own tasters? Was there a reciprocal tasting process? Or was the host taster solely responsible for everything served from the royal kitchens, with gifted food items treated with extreme prejudice? It's likely a combination, with a healthy dose of suspicion all around. You might find yourself in a silent palate-based standoff with the taster of a visiting dignitary, each of you eyeing the other's master's offerings with professional mistrust. A quirky or fringe tidbit during particularly tense political times, or if there were specific threats against the king, the number of tasters might be increased for a major banquet. Perhaps a team of you would share the burden, each specializing in certain types of dishes or tasting in a specific sequence. This might offer a small illusion of shared risk, but ultimately, if a poison is present, at least one of you will discover it the hard way. There might also be an anti-taster, someone whose job is to observe the other tasters for any sign of collusion or deliberate misdirection. The layers of paranoia could be as thick as the honey on the baklava. The sheer length of a grand Persian banquet also presents a challenge. These were not quick meals. They could last for many hours, with wave after wave of dishes being brought out. You would need to pace yourself, both in your tasting and in your capacity to remain vigilant. Fatigue is your enemy. A lapse in concentration, a moment of sensory weariness, could be fatal. The rich foods, the endless succession of flavors, the heady aroma of wine and incense, the noise and spectacle of the feast, all these can dull the senses. But yours must remain razor sharp, a beacon of caution in a sea of indulgence. As the evening wears on, and the king and his guests revel, you remain in your quiet corner, or perhaps circulate discreetly, your duty unceasing, the weight of the empire's safety resting, one small, perilous bite at a time, on your discerning and hopefully resilient tongue. The grand state banquet, with its overwhelming succession of roasted meats, elaborate stews, and jewel-like pilafs, has finally wound its way through the majority of its courses. You've navigated this culinary minefield with your usual blend of intense concentration and barely suppressed dread. And so far, so good. The king is regaling his foreign guests with tales of his latest victorious lion hunt, or perhaps just a particularly witty remark about the ambassador's outlandish hat, and the sounds of music and laughter some of it. You suspect a little too forced from the nervous kitchen staff fill the opulent hall. But your work isn't over. Now comes the part of the meal that many look forward to with delight, but which you approach with your customary, unwavering suspicion the afternoon or late evening desserts, fruits, and other sweet confections. These sweet deceits and fruits' potential foes might seem innocuous, a light and pleasant end to a heavy meal, but poison can lurk just as easily in a honeyed fig as in a haunch of venison. As the main courses are cleared away by an army of servants, new platters arrive, laden with an entirely different category of temptations and threats. There might be delicate pastries, flaky and filled with ground nuts and fragrant syrups. There could be rich, creamy puddings made with milk, rice flour, and sweetened with date molasses or honey, perhaps flavored with rosewater or saffron. And of course, there will be an abundance of fresh and dried fruits, plump grapes, glistening figs, succulent melons, sweet pomegranates, dates stuffed with almonds, and perhaps more exotic offerings from distant corners of the empire. A mainstream historical fact is that Persian cuisine has a long and celebrated tradition of elaborate desserts and a deep appreciation for the natural sweetness of fruits. These were not mere afterthoughts, but integral parts of a sophisticated culinary experience, often showcasing expensive ingredients like sugar, still a rare luxury, yes, honey, nuts, and spices. For you, they are just another series of potential vessels for harm. The tasting protocol remains largely the same, though the specific sensory challenges differ. Sweetness, however, for example, can be a powerful masking agent for certain bitter or metallic tasting poisons. You must be particularly attuned to any off notes that pierce through the dominant sugary flavors. A pastry that is just a little too bitter, a fruit compote with a strange, unidentifiable tang, a honey that has a faint chemical aftertaste. These are all red flags. You take a small piece of a delicate almond cookie, crumbling it first to examine its texture and aroma. Does it smell purely of almonds and honey? Or is there something else? Something off. You place a tiny portion on your tongue. The sweetness floods your senses, but beneath it, you search. Is there a lingering bitterness, a slight numbing sensation on your gums? It's like trying to find a single sour grape in an entire vineyard, but the sour grape could kill you. Fruits, while seemingly natural and wholesome, present their own set of dangers. Unbroken fruits like grapes or dates are often considered safer, but even these can be tampered with. A skilled assassin might use an incredibly fine needle to inject a potent toxin into a single grape in a large bunch, or into one fig in a bowl. Therefore, you cannot simply sample one grape and declare the whole bunch safe. You must be random, unpredictable, or select fruits that appear in any way unusual, slightly discolored, softer than others, or with any visible puncture mark. However, you might cut open several pieces of fruit, examining the flesh for any strange coloration or unexpected crystallization. It's meticulous, painstaking work, especially when faced with a mountain of glistening, tempting produce. This melon, you might think, holding up a slice to the light, looks perfectly innocent, almost too innocent, like a melon with a dark secret and a surprisingly good alibi. Historians still argue about the prevalence of specific fruit or sweet-based poisons in ancient assassination plots. While many common plant toxins are inherently bitter, some, or their derivatives, could potentially be masked in sugary concoctions or introduced in such small and potent doses that their taste is negligible. The fear was certainly there. You might also be wary of discoloration. A piece of cut fruit that darkens too quickly, or in an unusual pattern, could indicate a chemical reaction with an unknown substance. Your knowledge of how different fruits naturally oxidize is another tool in your arsenal. A quirky or fringe tidbit. There were beliefs in some ancient cultures that certain sweet substances, like honey, had inherent protective or antitoxic properties, or that they might react visibly with certain poisons. Royal honey was likely sourced with extreme care, perhaps from sacred temple apiaries or specially protected royal beekeepers. You still taste it with caution. Of course, after all, even the purest honey could be adulterated after it leaves the hive. The phrase "a fly in the ointment" takes on a rather more sinister meaning in your profession, where the fly might be a carefully disguised pellet of poison, and the ointment a delicious bowl of date paste. As you work your way through the sweet offerings, the festive atmosphere of the banquet continues around you. The wine flows the portions you approved earlier. Naturally, music plays and conversations become more animated. But you remain in your bubble of intense focus, a small island of sobriety and suspicion in an ocean of indulgence. Each sweet mouthful is a gamble, each fragrant fruit a potential Trojan horse. The sugar might coat your tongue, but it cannot coat your vigilance. The sweet deceits are often the most dangerous, lulling the unsuspecting into a false sense of security. But not you. You are the professional pessimist of the palate, the one who always looks for the bitter taste in the sweetest things, ensuring the king's sweet dreams are not preceded by your own permanent nightmare. The grand banquet, with its final flourish of dangerously delectable desserts, has at last concluded, or is at least winding down into the less formal stage of wine-fueled conversation, and perhaps some light musical entertainment. You've survived another elaborate culinary gauntlet, your senses and your stomach having processed a bewildering array of potential threats. But the life of a Persian royal food taster isn't confined to the gilded cages of palace dining halls. The King of Kings is not a sedentary ruler. He might embark on extended royal progresses through his vast empire, or, more frequently, indulge in the noble Persian pastime of hunting. And when the king dines al fresco, far from the controlled environment of the palace kitchens, your duties follow, bringing new challenges and a fresh set of anxieties. You must now sample rustic, sometimes hastily prepared fare during these royal hunts and excursions, a world away from the meticulous protocols of Persepolis. This is the realm of Hunt's hazardous provisions. Imagine the scene: the king and his retinue, a vibrant, noisy cavalcade of nobles, guards, beaters, and dog handlers, are deep in the game-rich plains or forests of Media or Bactria. A successful hunt has concluded. Perhaps a mighty lion has been felled by the king's own spear with a little discreet help from his bodyguards. Naturally. Or a great stag has been brought down. A temporary camp is established. Fires are lit. The air, instead of carrying the perfumes of saffron and rosewater, now smells of wood smoke, roasting meat, and the earthy scent of the wilderness. A mainstream historical fact is that hunting was a crucial royal activity in Achaemenid Persia, depicted extensively in royal art and inscriptions. It was not just a sport but a display of courage, skill, and kingly virtue, a way for the ruler to demonstrate his mastery over the wild and his fitness to rule. And, of course, a successful hunt often culminated in a celebratory outdoor feast. The food prepared in such a setting is, by necessity, simpler than the elaborate concoctions of the palace. The freshly killed game might be roasted whole over open fires, or cut into chunks and grilled on skewers. There might be rougher, campaign-style bread, baked perhaps on hot stones or in a makeshift clay oven. Fruits and vegetables would be whatever could be foraged locally or carried with the hunting party. Water would be drawn from nearby streams or springs. While this rustic simplicity might seem less prone to sophisticated poisoning plots, it brings its own dangers. The lack of established kitchen facilities, the reduced number of trusted staff, the potential for contamination from less than ideal water sources, or even the chance of accidentally preparing a naturally poisonous local plant, mistaken for an edible one. All these are new variables you must contend with. Your tasting process here is perhaps less formal, but no less vital. You might not have your dedicated silver tasting spoons, but you will still take a portion of each item before the king partakes. The roasted venison, charred on the outside and dripping with juices. Does it taste purely of smoke and meat? Or is there an unfamiliar acridity, that handful of wild berries offered by a local guide? Are they a known edible variety? Or do they bear a suspicious resemblance to the death nubs your grandmother warned you about the water from the stream? Does it have a muddy taste that simply indicates silt, or a more sinister, brackish quality? It's a raw, elemental form of tasting, relying heavily on your fundamental senses and your knowledge of natural lore. If you possess any, this particular root, found by cheerful Barca the beater, has a certain, instantly paralyzes your diaphragm aroma. Perhaps we'll give that one a miss. Your Majesty, the pressure might feel different out here. The atmosphere is more boisterous, less constrained by palace etiquette. The king, flushed with the thrill of the hunt, might be in a more expansive, perhaps even reckless mood. He might be impatient to eat, eager to celebrate his prowess. Your careful, methodical tasting could seem like a tedious delay. You must remain firm, your focus unwavering despite the more chaotic environment. The guards around the king's impromptu dining area are still present, but the overall security is inevitably less tight than within the palace walls. An assassin might see such an occasion as a prime opportunity, a moment when vigilance is relaxed. Historians still argue about the logistical complexities of supplying a royal hunting party on the move for days or even weeks. While they would carry significant provisions, supplementing them with fresh game and local forage was common, introducing the very unpredictability that makes your job so challenging. You might even be called upon to taste ingredients you've never encountered before, relying on the assurances of local guides, assurances you must take with a significant grain of salt, which you would also, metaphorically, taste for poison, a quirky or fringe tidbit. There are tales from various cultures of hunters using specific rituals or making offerings to nature spirits or deities of the hunt to ensure not only a successful chase, but also the safety of the food obtained. Perhaps the king's chief huntsman performs a small ceremony over the slain beast, ostensibly to thank it for its sacrifice wine, but also, in a way, to ritually purify it before consumption. You watch these rituals with a professional interest. Anything that might reduce the chances of a bad outcome is welcome, though you place more faith in your own senses than in the appeasement of a grumpy forest dryad. The wild, untamed nature of the hunt extends to its culinary offerings. Each smoky, rustic bite is a gamble, a reminder that danger doesn't only reside in the perfumed subtlety of palace poisons, but also in the untamed, unpredictable bounty of the wilderness. Your vigilance must be as boundless as the king's hunting grounds. The dust of the royal hunt has settled, or perhaps the king has simply returned to his urban palace after a day of less strenuous, but no less important, imperial duties. As twilight deepens, casting long, dancing shadows across the intricately carved reliefs of Persepolis, the palace begins to prepare for its final grand culinary event of the day, the evening banquet. This is not merely a meal, it is a statement. a carefully orchestrated display of the Achaemenid Empire's boundless wealth, its sophisticated culture, and the unassailable power of the King of Kings. And for you, the royal food taster, it represents the Twilight Banquet's grand gamble, your ultimate, most elaborate, and often most perilous daily test. The day may be ending, but your most intense work is often just beginning. The evening banquet typically surpasses all other meals in its opulence, complexity, and sheer duration. A mainstream historical fact is that ancient Persian royal dinners, as described by Greek historians like Herodotus and Xenophon, though sometimes with a degree of Hellenic exaggeration or misunderstanding, were legendary for their extravagance, featuring a multitude of courses, rare delicacies, and vast quantities of food and wine, often served to hundreds, if not thousands, of guests when including the broader court and high-ranking military officials. Imagine a culinary marathon where each station offers a new, potentially lethal delight. That's your evening shift. The atmosphere in the kitchens reaches a fever pitch. The chief chef, who might have seemed merely stressed during the day, now wears an expression of almost divine creative fury, orchestrating his army of cooks like a general deploying troops for a decisive battle. The fires in the great ovens roar. The scent of roasting peacocks, whole stuffed camels, a dish of almost mythical ostentation, though perhaps more legend than regular fare by, and impossibly intricate confections fills the air, mingling with the heady perfume of incense burned in the banqueting hall. The sheer number of dishes prepared is staggering. It's not just about variety, it's about overwhelming abundance, a tangible demonstration that the king's resources are without limit. For you, this abundance translates into an almost overwhelming number of items to sample. Your palate, already taxed by the day's earlier tastings, must now rally for its most demanding performance. The tasting protocol for the evening banquet is often even more rigorous and ceremonial than for other meals. You might be required to taste not just a sample of each dish, but also the specific portion intended for the king if it's a particularly important or suspect item. The pressure is at its zenith. The eyes of the entire court, or at least its most senior members, might be upon you at various stages. Any sign of hesitation, any flicker of doubt, could send ripples of unease through the assembled nobility and draw unwanted attention from the king himself. You must be a paragon of calm, focused professionalism, even if your insides are churning with a mixture of fine wine cautiously sipped, of course, in pure, unadulterated terror. This roasted dormouse stuffed with poppy seeds and regret exquisite. A bold choice, no notes of imminent agony detected. Yet, the wines served at the evening banquet are often the oldest, rarest, and most valuable in the royal cellars. Each amphora unsealed, each goblet poured, represents another potential vector for poison. You meticulously examine the color, the clarity, the aroma of each new vintage before taking that crucial sip. The king and his guests might be engaging in witty conversation, entertained by musicians playing soft melodies on harps and flutes, or watching graceful dancers. But your world is narrowed to the contents of your tasting cup, the subtle sensations on your tongue, the silent, urgent question safe or not safe. Historians still argue about the precise seating arrangements and etiquette of Persian royal banquets, and the role of the taster within this elaborate social theater. Were you a shadowy, almost invisible presence, or did your tasting sometimes occur with a degree of public ceremony, a demonstration of the king's vigilance and the loyalty of his servants? It likely varied, but the responsibility remained the same. A quirky or fringe tidbit, some ancient rulers were said to employ doubles or decoys in public situations to reduce the risk of assassination. One wonders if there was ever a decoy taster, someone who pretended to taste the food to draw out an assassin's attention, while the real tasting happened more discreetly. A rather grim thought, and probably not a job with many repeat applicants. For you, there are no decoys. Your palate is the final checkpoint. As the long evening progresses, course after course, your endurance is tested. The rich foods, the cumulative effect of many small sips of different wines. The late hour, all conspire to dull your senses. But you must fight against this fatigue. The last dish served is just as likely to be poisoned as the first. Indeed, An assassin might reason that the taster's vigilance would wane as the night wore on. You are the final guardian of the king's night, the one who ensures that his slumber will not be eternal, at least not due to tonight's dinner. The grand gamble of the twilight banquet is a fitting, high-stakes culmination to your day, a last flourish of culinary danger before you. 2. Can hope for a few hours of uneasy rest. The final notes of the banquet musicians have faded into the vast, incense-scented air of the great hall. The king, his noble guests, and the myriad courtiers have retired, their bellies full, their minds perhaps buzzing with wine and intrigue. The remnants of the grand feast, picked over platters, half-empty wine goblets, and the general detritus of opulent consumption, are being cleared away by an army of weary servants. For most, the day's duties are done. But for you, the ever-vigilant royal food taster, there remains one last crucial task before you can even think of seeking your own rest, the nightly chronicle of caution. You must meticulously record the day's critical tastings, noting any subtle anomalies, any unusual occurrences in the kitchen, any ingredient that gave you even a moment's pause. This isn't just personal record-keeping, it's vital intelligence for the ongoing security of the King of Kings. You retreat to your chamber, or perhaps to a small, designated office space if your role affords such a luxury. The quiet here is a stark contrast to the sensory overload of the banquet. By the flickering light of an oil lamp, you unroll a fresh sheet of papyrus or prepare a smoothed clay tablet and a stylus. Your tools are simple, but the information you are about to inscribe is of paramount importance. A mainstream historical fact is that record-keeping was a highly developed art in the Achaemenid Empire. With extensive archives documenting everything from tax receipts and troop movements to royal decrees and, quite possibly, detailed palace inventories and procedures. While specific records from food tasters might not have survived, the administrative mindset of the empire suggests that such a critical function would likely have involved some form of documentation. Your chronicle is not a diary of your feelings, your fears, or your existential angst, though you could probably fill volumes with that. It is a precise, objective report. You begin with the king's breakfast list, the main dishes tasted, any new ingredients noted, the source of the water and wine. Were there any deviations from the norm? That slightly unusual sharpness in the pheasant sauce you mentioned to the chief chef earlier. You record it, along with his explanation or lack thereof. The new batch of median honey, its quality and perceived purity are noted. Every detail matters. What seems insignificant today might form part of a pattern tomorrow. It's like being a detective meticulously compiling an evidence log, where the evidence is a series of fleeting tastes and smells. Item 3, grilled partridge, aroma consistent with previous servings. Texture satisfactory, no unusual aftertaste, provisional clearance given at third hour post-sunrise. Observation period completed without incident. Physician Artabanus, guards Gobrius, Megabyzus. Terse, factual, vital. You move through the day's meals, the midday repast, any snacks or special beverages served, and finally, the elaborate evening banquet. The banquet section of your report will be the longest and most complex, given the sheer number of dishes. You might not list every single almond in every pastry, but you will note any new or unusual preparations, any dishes that caused you particular concern, however fleeting, and the results of your tasting and subsequent observation period. Were there any gifted food items from the ambassadors who prepared them? How were they tested? What were your findings? This information is crucial for diplomatic intelligence as well as for security. If an ambassador from Bactria consistently offers dishes that give you a mild but persistent stomachache, that's a data point worth recording. Perhaps he just has a terrible personal chef. Or perhaps it's something more. Historians still argue about the literacy levels among various court functionaries in empires like Persia. While high scribes and administrators were certainly literate, was a food taster necessarily expected to read and write with proficiency? It's plausible that some tasters might have dictated their reports to a scribe, or used a system of memorized symbols or tokens if they were not fully literate themselves. However, given the critical nature of the information, direct, accurate recording by the taster, if capable, would have been preferred. Your ability to not only discern but also to articulate and document your findings is part of your value. You're not just a palate. You're an intelligence analyst specializing in edible threats. A quirky or fringe tidbit, there might have been a secret language or a set of coded phrases used in these reports to denote varying levels of suspicion, without causing undue alarm if the report fell into the wrong hands. A phrase like, "the figs from Smyrna possessed a certain melancholy sweetness," might be a coded way of saying, "those figs made me feel a bit queasy." Watch out for future shipments from Smyrna. Or "the wine from the Cypriot amphora sang a rather flat note," could mean that wine had a suspicious tang, probably best used for washing the chariot wheels. This adds a layer of intrigue to your already fascinating, if terrifying, job. You're not just writing a report, you're crafting a carefully worded piece of classified intelligence. This nightly chronicle is a solemn duty. It is your testament to the day's vigilance, a formal record of your survival and, by extension, the king's. It is also a tool for future prevention, a database of flavors, sources, and suspicions that can inform tomorrow's security measures. As you carefully roll up your completed papyrus or set aside your inscribed tablet for collection by a trusted royal archivist, you feel a grim sense of accomplishment. Another day navigated, another set of risks assessed and documented. The ink, or the incised clay, is a tangible record of your precarious existence, a nightly whisper of caution into the ear of the Empire's security apparatus. And with that final duty discharged, you can finally, truly, prepare for whatever small measure of rest the night might offer. Your nightly chronicle, that meticulous testament to a day spent dicing with death by dairy or doom by date, is complete. The faint, like smoky scent of your oil lamp mingles with the lingering phantom aromas of 1,000 spices and roasted meats that still cling to your senses. A ghostly reminder of your waking hours. You have performed your ablutions for the night, the cool water a welcome balm against the day's accumulated tension. You extinguish the lamp, and your modest chamber is plunged into a profound, velvety darkness, a stark contrast to the glittering, torch-lit opulence of the royal banqueting halls. Finally, you can seek your sleeping mat, but as you lie there, listening to the muted sounds of the vast Persian palace settling into its own uneasy slumber, you find that true rest is an elusive guest. This is the hour of guarded sleep and, all too often, poisoned dreams, the final lingering consequence of your perilous, palate-driven existence. The physical exhaustion is undeniable. Your senses have been on high alert for countless hours. Your body subjected to a constant, low-level anxiety, punctuated by moments of acute, heart-stopping fear during each tasting and subsequent observation period. Every muscle aches with a weariness that goes bone deep. Yet, your mind often refuses to quiet. It replays the day's events, not in a gentle, reminiscent way, but with the sharp, analytical focus of a sentinel who cannot afford to lower his guard, even in sleep. Did you miss something? That slightly unusual sheen on the glazed pheasant? Was it just the honey glaze catching the light? Or something more sinister? The way the Lydian ambassador's cook avoided your gaze when you tasted the gifted olives? Was it guilt or merely shyness? These thoughts circle like vultures, picking at the edges of your consciousness. A mainstream historical fact is that individuals in high-stress occupations throughout history here have often suffered from sleep disturbances and heightened anxiety. And it's hard to imagine a more chronically stressful job than knowingly, repeatedly ingesting potentially lethal substances. PTSD probably came with the territory, though they wouldn't have called it that. They'd probably call it Tuesday. As you drift on the very edge of sleep, the flavors and textures of the day can return with unnerving vividness. You might experience phantom tastes, a sudden imaginary bitterness on your tongue that jolts you awake, your heart pounding, convinced for a terrifying moment that a delayed action poison is finally taking effect. Or you might find yourself mentally retasting a particularly suspect dish, trying to isolate that one elusive, discordant note that troubled you. Your dreams, when they finally come, are rarely peaceful pastorals. More often, they are a chaotic melange of your waking fears. You dream of banquets where every dish writhes with unseen serpents, of golden goblets filled with bubbling, black liquids, of shadowy figures slipping powders into steaming stews. You might dream you are running through endless palace corridors, pursued by a giant, sentient fig with malevolent intentions. Or you find yourself in the observation chamber, the physician's face grim, as a terrifying paralysis creeps up your limbs. It's not exactly restful. Oh, good, you think, as you jolt awake from a dream where you were forced to taste Zeus's lightning bolts. Another night of serene, untroubled slumber. My compliments to Morpheus, the god of really messed up occupational nightmares. Historians still argue about the psychological coping mechanisms available to people in such extreme professions in the ancient world. Was there a role for religious faith? For philosophical detachment? For a kind of stoic fatalism? Perhaps you cling to the tenets of Zoroastrianism, focusing on the eternal battle between Asha, truth and order, and Druj, falsehood and chaos. Seeing your role as a small part of upholding Asha by protecting the divinely appointed king. Or maybe you simply develop a very dark, very dry sense of humor, shared only with the royal physician or perhaps a fellow long-suffering taster. If such a camaraderie is even permitted in an environment so rife with suspicion, a quirky or fringe tidbit. Some ancient texts on dream interpretation, a very popular subject, might have even had specific entries for the dreams of those in dangerous professions. A taster dreaming of a sweet fruit turning bitter might be interpreted as a warning about a trusted friend's betrayal, or perhaps just a sign that you really need to lay off the king's preserved quinces. Your subconscious is working overtime, processing the day's anxieties and transforming them into these nocturnal dramas. There is no true off switch for your vigilance. Even in the deepest hours of the night, a part of you remains on guard, your senses still half-cocked for the taste of treachery. The moon, perhaps Selene on her own celestial journey we once discussed, casts pale light through your window, tracing shifting patterns on the far wall. You watch them, trying to regulate your breathing, to find a small island of calm in the turbulent sea of your thoughts. Tomorrow will bring the same dawn, the same rituals, the same perilous purpose. The king will require his breakfast, and you will be there, your palate primed, your life once more on the line. But for these few precious, guarded hours, you try to let go, to allow the heavy cloak of responsibility to slip from your shoulders, even if it only pools at your feet. Ready to be reassumed with the first light? Sleep, when it finally claims you fully, is less a gentle surrender and more a temporary, uneasy truce in your daily war against a poisoned world. The last echoes of your troubled, poison-laced dreams begin to recede, like the lingering scent of incense from the king's now silent banqueting hall. The weight of your nightly chronicle, that meticulous accounting of perils tasted and survived, feels a little lighter now, as the deepest part of the night enfolds the vast Persian palace in its quiet, velvety embrace. The phantom flavors that haunted your waking moments and danced through your sleep start to neutralize, leaving your palate, and hopefully your mind, to find a brief, if imperfect, neutrality. The intense scrutiny of the day, the hyper-awareness that is both your shield and your burden, can finally, gently, begin to soften at its sharp edges. There are no more dishes to inspect with a discerning eye, no more goblets of wine to swirl with suspicion, no more silent, agonizing waits in the observation chamber, listening for the first telltale sign of a substance designed to end life. For these fleeting hours, your body is simply your own, not a royal instrument, not a living litmus test. The constant, low thrum of anxiety that underscores your every waking moment may quiet to a faint, distant hum, allowing a measure of peace to seep into your weary bones. The responsibility for the King of Kings' well-being, for the stability of the empire that rests so heavily on his continued existence, is momentarily lifted, shared by the stoic night guards patrolling the silent corridors and the distant, unblinking stars that wheel slowly overhead. Let the grand, opulent images of the Persian court, the gleaming gold, the vibrant tapestries, the endless procession of exquisite, potentially lethal, culinary creations dissolve into simpler, softer forms. The sharp glint of a silver tasting spoon can become the gentle curve of a crescent moon glimpsed through your chamber window. The rich, complex aroma of a royal stew can transform into the plain, honest scent of cool night air. The meticulous vigilance can ease into a more diffuse awareness. The the kind that allows for the gentle drift into unconsciousness, where the only flavors are those of peaceful oblivion, and the only risks are those of oversleeping. Your extraordinary day, with its unique blend of luxury and lethality, is now complete. Allow the quiet of this moment to be your trusted companion, your safest offering, as you journey into the deep, untroubled lands of sleep